The air recyclers on EOS 9 whined their familiar protest as Finn Rilo tightened the last bolt on the maintenance panel. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the perpetual chill of the station's lower levels. This was the third time this month he'd patched this particular system, using parts salvaged from even older equipment. Like everything else on this forgotten orbital outpost, it was held together with improvisation and stubborn determination. That should hold for another cycle, he muttered to himself, knowing full well it wouldn't. Nothing ever held for long out here on the fringes. Finn gathered his tools, a collection as mismatched and worn as the station itself, and slid them back into the batter case emblazoned with the faded logo of a company that had gone defunct 3 years ago. Just like his previous employer and the one before that, the universe had a way of making things obsolete, companies and people alike. The corridor leading back to his quarters was dimly lit, with every third illumination panel flickering or dead entirely. Management saw no reason to waste resources on proper lighting in maintenance sections. The vast corporate entity that owned EOS 9 cared only that the commercial levels remained presentable for the occasional trader or corporate representative passing through. People like Finn, station fixers, the invisible workforce that kept everything from catastrophic decompression, were expected to make do with less. Much less. His quarters, if they could be dignified with such a term, were little more than a repurposed storage compartment. 10 steps across at its widest point, with a fold-down cot, a hygiene cubicle barely large enough to turn around in, and a food prep surface that doubled as his desk. The viewport, the one luxury, if you could call an 18-inch circle of reinforced glass a luxury, offered a view of nothing but the endless void. Sometimes Finn would stare out at that emptiness and wonder if it was staring back, equally disinterested. Finn pressed his thumb against the entry pad and waited for the door's characteristic stutter slide. Inside, the air was stale. The environmental controls in his section had been operating at 60% efficiency for months now, despite his repeated maintenance requests. Management's response was always the same. Non-critical, will address when resources permit. He dropped his tool case by the door and pressed the activation switch for the small food synthesizer. Another salvage piece that produced barely edible protein compounds with the approximate taste and texture of cardboard. As it hummed to life, the entire unit shuddered violently, emitting a high-pitched whine before shutting down completely. Perfect, Finn sighed, running a hand through his dark, unkempt hair. Just perfect. It was the last in a series of misfortunes that had marked his day. A coolant leak in Section 4, malfunctioning gravity regulators in the cargo bay, and now this. He'd have to either fix the synthesizer or spend his meager credits at the station's overpriced communal canteen. As Finn contemplated which parts he might cannibalize to repair his food unit, the station's emergency alert system activated with a piercing wail. Red warning lights pulsed along the corridor outside his quarters. Warning: life support failure detected in residential Section 7. Oxygen levels decreasing. All personnel evacuate immediately. Finn froze. Section 7. That was his section. He glanced at the environmental monitor near his door. Oxygen was indeed dropping, already down to 19% and falling. At 15%, cognitive impairment would begin. At 10, unconsciousness. Below that, moving with practiced efficiency born from too many similar emergencies. Finn grabbed his emergency respirator and slung it around his neck without activating it yet. He needed to conserve the limited oxygen supply. Then he reached for his tool case. If the main systems were failing, someone would need to initiate the backup, and station security was notoriously slow to respond to emergencies in the lower sections. Just as he palmed the door control, it slid open of its own accord. Finn stumbled back in surprise, nearly tripping over his tool case. Standing in his doorway was a woman. No, not a woman. Not human, at least not entirely. Her skin had an iridescent quality, with subtle patterns that shifted with the pulsing emergency lights. Silver blue in hue, with delicate scaling at her temples that extended back to frame features that were both alien and hauntingly beautiful. Her eyes, large and luminous, were a startling shade of violet, with vertical pupils that widened slightly as they fixed on him. She wore what could only be described as armor, though it appeared more ceremonial than practical. An intricate arrangement of metallic plates and flowing fabric in deep crimson and burnished gold. It was elegant, expensive, and entirely out of place in the dingy corridor of EOS 9's maintenance sector. Despite her composed exterior, there was something in her posture that spoke of tension. The slight tightness around her eyes, the way her slender fingers gripped the ornate bag she carried. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, the human maintenance worker and the alien aristocrat, while the emergency sirens continued to wail. Finn Rilo. Her voice had an unusual cadence, musical yet precise, with an accent he couldn't place. How do you know my name? Finn asked, instantly suspicious. In his experience, being singled out by name usually meant trouble. I am Monsieur Valquin of House Valquin, 7th lineage, she said, as if that should mean something to him. When his expression remained blank, she continued with a hint of impatience. May I enter? What I have to discuss is urgent and private. Lady, there's an oxygen failure happening right now. We need to evacuate, not chat. Finn gestured to the flashing lights. She glanced at the warning indicators with what appeared to be mild annoyance, then lifted her wrist. A complex device wrapped around her forearm emitted a soft blue glow as she manipulated several controls. The system malfunction has been addressed. Oxygen levels are now stabilizing. As if on cue, the alarm ceased and the emergency lights returned to standard illumination. Finn's environmental monitor confirmed her claim. Oxygen levels were indeed rising back to normal parameters. Did you just fix the life support system? From your wrist. A simple override. Your station's security protocols are primitive. She said this without arrogance, merely stating a fact. Now, may I enter? Time is of critical importance. Still stunned by her casual display of technological superiority, Finn stepped aside. She entered his quarters, her eyes taking in the cramped space with an unreadable expression. You have 71 hours to make your decision, she said without preamble, turning to face him. Though I would prefer an answer now. Decision about what? Who are you? What's going on? Finn's patience was rapidly evaporating. And how did you just override station systems like that? I told you, I am Monsieur Valquin. As for your other questions, she hesitated, then straightened her shoulders, her expression becoming more formal. I require a husband. Immediately. You are an acceptable candidate. Finn stared at her, certain he had misheard. You require a what now? A husband. A mate. A legal partner bound by the Dominion's interspecies marriage code. She spoke as if explaining a simple concept to a child. And I need one within 71 hours. Okay, why me? And why the rush? Finn leaned against his tiny food prep surface, trying to process this bizarre encounter. My previous husband died 14 standard days ago, she stated, her voice betraying no emotion. Under Dominion law, specifically the Dollar Clause, I have 85 standard days to secure a new legal partnership, or all assets, properties, and legal standing of House Valquin revert to state control. Sorry for your loss. Finn offered, unsure of the proper protocol. She acknowledged his condolence with a slight nod. The loss of Radith was significant, but sentiment is not why I am here. I have spent 71 days searching for a suitable replacement. You are my final option before the deadline expires. And what happens if you don't find someone in time? Her expression darkened slightly. Everything my family has built over 9 generations will be seized. I will be stripped of citizenship status and categorized as state property. In practical terms, I would be sold into service contracts to recover administrative costs. A polite term for indentured servitude. Finn's eyebrows shot up. That's legal. For non-citizens without familial protection, yes. The Dominion's laws are severe when it comes to maintaining proper lineage structures. She spoke dispassionately, but Finn detected a flicker of fear beneath her composed exterior. But why me? I mean, look at this place. Finn gestured around his tiny quarters. I'm nobody. Just a station fixer barely making enough credits to eat. Precisely why you were selected. Nishura reached into her bag and withdrew a small holographic projector. With a flick of her wrist, Finn's personal data floated in the air between them. Identification, work history, credit score, medical records. Hey, that's private. Finn protested, though he knew privacy was largely an illusion in corporate space. You have no existing family alliances, no significant debts to rival factions, no political affiliations that would compromise House Valquin, and most importantly, a completely unremarkable profile that draws minimal scrutiny. She deactivated the projection. You are, in bureaucratic terms, invisible. This makes you ideal. Gee, thanks, Finn muttered. It was not an insult, Nishura clarified. It was a statement of your primary qualification. Additionally, your genetic profile is compatible with Valquin lineage requirements for potential offspring. Finn choked on nothing. Offspring? Listen, lady, that would be a consideration for the future, not an immediate requirement, she interrupted. What I offer in exchange is considerable. All your existing debts will be cleared. You will be granted a living stipend befitting a Valquin consort. You will receive legal protection under House Valquin's considerable influence. His mind reeled at the implications. Financial freedom, an end to the constant struggle for survival on this decaying station. A way out. And what exactly would I have to do? Sign a marriage contract. Participate in minimal ceremonial requirements. Cohabitate with me for the legally mandated verification period of 1 standard year. She paused, her violet eyes meeting his directly. And I will, as your human expression goes, warm your bed. The blunt statement, delivered in her formal cadence, caught Finn completely off guard. He felt heat rise to his face. That's direct. Understand, physical companionship is a standard expectation in human marriages. I am prepared to fulfill this obligation. Her expression remained neutral, but something in her eyes seemed to waver slightly. Is that not acceptable? Finn ran a hand through his hair, mind racing. The offer was simultaneously absurd and tempting. A way out of his dead-end existence, financial security, and she was undeniably attractive, even with, or perhaps because of, her alien features. But it was also clearly transactional. A business arrangement dressed up as marriage. And something about that made him uneasy, despite his desperate circumstances. This is crazy, he finally said. You don't know me. I don't know you. Marriage it's not just a contract. In the Dominion, it is precisely that. Nishura's voice cooled. Perhaps I have misjudged human sentimentality on this matter. I should not have expected. I didn't say no, Finn interrupted, surprising himself. This is a lot to process. Nishura studied him for a moment, then reached back into her bag. She withdrew what appeared to be a small crystal, which she placed on his food prep surface. This contains the full legal contract, translated into standard. It details all obligations, benefits, and terms. She stepped back. Review it. I will return in 12 hours for your answer. And if I say yes. For the first time, a faint smile touched her lips. Then prepare for your life to change, Finn Rilo. She turned to leave, her movements graceful despite the confined space. Wait, Finn called after her. Where are you going? Where will you stay? I have secured temporary accommodations in the commercial sector. She paused at the door. The contract requires cohabitation, but only after formalization. With that, she was gone, leaving Finn alone in his tiny quarters, staring at the crystal that promised either salvation or complication beyond imagining. For hours, Finn paced his small room, occasionally stopping to examine the crystal Nishura had left. When he finally placed it on the reader embedded in his modest information terminal, holographic text in both an alien script and standard English floated before him. The contract was exhaustive, detailing everything from financial arrangements to legal protections to intimate expectations. It was the most bizarre thing that had ever happened to him, yet something about it felt like destiny. Or at least the closest thing to destiny a man like him could expect. A random collision of circumstances that just might, lead to something better than the slow decay of life on EOS 9. What did he have to lose? His freedom? He scoffed at the thought. What freedom did he have, tethered to the station by debt and limited opportunities? His dignity? That had been stripped away years ago by corporate whims and the daily humiliations of servitude in all but name. When Nishura returned exactly 12 hours later, Finn was waiting with his decision. Yes, he said simply as she entered. I'll do it. If she was surprised or pleased, she hid it well. She merely nodded and extended her hand, palm up. A small biometric scanner materialized above it. Place your hand above mine, she instructed. Finn hesitated only briefly before complying. A warm sensation spread across his palm as the scanner read his biological signature. I, Nishura Valquin, accept Finn Rilo as legal consort under Dominion law, Section 42, Paragraph 7, invoking the Dalek Clause exception. Her voice took on a formal cadence, as if reciting ancient words. Do you, Finn Rilo, accept this union with all rights and responsibilities therein? The moment stretched between them, heavy with implications. Finn took a deep breath. I do. The scanner between their hands pulsed with golden light, then disappeared. In its place, a thin band of metallic material materialized around Finn's left wrist. The contract is sealed, Nishura stated. We are now legally bonded. And just like that, Finn Rilo was married to an alien aristocrat he had met less than a day ago. The universe, it seemed, had a strange sense of humor. So, what happens now? He asked, examining the band on his wrist. Now, Nishura said, hoisting her bag. I move in. Nishura's possessions, when unpacked, were surprisingly modest for someone of her apparent status. A few changes of clothing, all with the same regal quality as what she wore, some personal grooming items that Finn couldn't begin to identify, and several technological devices that hummed with quiet energy. This is all you brought? Finn asked as she efficiently arranged her belongings in the tiny space he had hastily cleared for her. These are essential items only. The bulk of my possessions remain in secure storage. She glanced around the cramped quarters. This arrangement is temporary. Temporary? Finn raised an eyebrow. The contract said 1 standard year minimum. Yes, but not necessarily in this. She paused, searching for a diplomatic word, location. Finn felt a twinge of defensiveness. Sorry, it's not up to your standards, Your Highness. Nishura looked at him sharply. I'm not royalty. House Valquin is mercantile nobility, 4th tier. And I did not intend criticism. This space is simply inadequate for 2 occupants by any objective measure. Before Finn could respond, the environmental unit emitted a loud clank followed by a high-pitched whine. The temperature, already cool, dropped noticeably. And apparently unstable, Nishura added. Finn sighed and moved toward the unit's access panel. Welcome to EOS 9. Nothing works right for long. As he knelt to remove the panel, Nishura approached, watching with interest. You repair these systems yourself? Someone has to. Station maintenance takes days to respond, if they come at all. Finn grimaced as he examined the interior components. Thermal regulators shot again. I'll have to bypass it, and... May I? Nishura interrupted, extending her hand. Finn hesitated, then handed her his diagnostic tool. She examined it briefly, then set it aside, instead removing a small device from her wrist gauntlet. It expanded in her palm into something resembling a scanner, but far more sophisticated than anything Finn had seen before. She passed it over the environmental unit, frowning slightly at the readings. Inefficient design. The thermal modulation is competing with the air filtration system. She made some adjustments to her device, then pressed it against the main control node. The unit hummed, stuttered, then began running with a smooth, quiet efficiency Finn had never heard from it before. How did you? Basic thermal engineering, she replied, collapsing the device back into her gauntlet. Your station uses Galactic pattern environmental systems. Outdated, but reliable when properly calibrated. The temperature in the room began rising to a comfortable level. Finn stared at her with newfound respect. You're an engineer? I was trained in multiple disciplines appropriate to my station, Nishura said, her voice neutral. Technical proficiency is expected of any Valquin heir. To what exactly? Finn asked, realizing how little he actually knew about his new wife. Nishura was silent for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. House Valquin controls 17 manufacturing outposts across 3 systems, specializing in quantum communication arrays and long-range terraforming equipment. We also maintain exclusive mining rights to the asteroid belt in the Sela system. Finn whistled softly. So you're rich. House Valquin has considerable resources, she corrected. Individual wealth is a human concept. In the Dominion, assets belong to the lineage, not the person, which is why you needed to marry so quickly, Finn remembered. To keep it all in the family. To preserve 9 generations of achievement from bureaucratic seizure, she said with a hint of defensiveness. And to prevent my personal reclassification. A moment of awkward silence followed as they both contemplated the strange circumstances that had brought them together. Finn was the first to break it. Are you hungry? I could go to the canteen and bring something back. Nishura glanced at the malfunctioning food synthesizer. That would be acceptable. When Finn returned with 2 containers of what the canteen optimistically called protein stew, he found Nishura sitting cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, hands resting on her knees. A faint blue glow emanated from the scales at her temples. Food's here, he announced, unsure if he was interrupting something important. Her eyes opened immediately, the glow fading. Thank you. As they ate, Finn at his small desk, Nishura perched on the edge of his cot. Another awkward silence. Descended. For all the legal formality of their union, they were still strangers sharing an intimate space. So, Finn ventured, what's the Dominion like? I've never been beyond corporate space. Vast. Ordered. Beautiful in its way. Nishura took a careful bite of the stew, her expression betraying no opinion on its quality. The central worlds are primarily architectural achievements, cities spanning entire continents, orbital habitats housing millions. The outer systems are more varied, with terraformed planets maintaining elements of their original ecosystems. Sounds nice, Finn said, trying to imagine it. His entire life had been spent on stations like EOS 9, or worse, mining platforms with no views at all. It can be, Nishura agreed, though beauty often masks rigid structures. The Dominion values order above all. Is that why the marriage laws are so strict? Nishura set down her spoon. Lineage stability ensures economic stability. The Dominion grew from the ashes of what you would call a dark age, when resources were controlled by transient power structures that collapsed with individual deaths. The current system prevents such disruptions. At the cost of personal freedom, Finn observed. Freedom is relative, she countered. Is working endlessly to maintain this station for minimal compensation freedom? Are you truly free, Finn Rilo? The question struck closer to home than he cared to admit. Touché. As the meal concluded, the practical reality of their arrangement became unavoidable. The quarters contained only 1 narrow cot, barely sufficient for Finn alone, let alone for sharing. I'll sleep on the floor, Finn offered, already looking for something to serve as a makeshift bedroll. That is unnecessary, Nishura stated. The contract specifies cohabitation. Shared sleeping arrangements are standard. Finn felt his face warm. Right, but we're not. We don't have to. Intimate relations are not required at this time, she said matter-of-factly. However, body heat conservation in this poorly regulated environment is logical. I run at a lower core temperature than humans and find this station's ambient temperature challenging. So you actually want to warm my bed? Finn couldn't help a small smile at the literal interpretation of her earlier phrase. For the first time, Nishura's composed expression cracked slightly, revealing what might have been embarrassment. The expression was used advisedly. It seemed to convey the appropriate sentiment in human terms. That night, they arranged themselves carefully on the narrow cot, backs touching, each acutely aware of the other's presence. Despite the awkwardness, Finn had to admit the additional warmth was welcome in his chronically cold quarters. And something about Nishura's steady breathing was oddly comforting after years of sleeping alone. Just before he drifted off, a thought occurred to him. Nishira? What happens if they find out this marriage isn't, real? There was a long pause before she answered, her voice quieter than usual. Then I lose everything, and freedom becomes a distant memory. The gravity of her situation hung in the air between them, making their arranged marriage suddenly feel much more consequential than a simple business transaction. The following days established an uneasy routine. Finn continued his maintenance duties while Nishira spent hours communicating via her sophisticated equipment with what he presumed were Valquin representatives. They navigated the confined space with careful politeness, establishing unspoken boundaries and accommodating each other's habits with minimal discussion. Their sleeping arrangement remained chaste but gradually more comfortable as initial awkwardness gave way to familiarity. Finn found himself growing accustomed to Nishira's presence, the subtle fragrance she exuded, the slight humming sound she made while in her meditative state, the way she methodically organized everything within reach. On the fourth day, as Finn returned from a particularly grueling shift repairing atmospheric regulators, Nishira was waiting with an unusually serious expression. "We have a problem," she announced without preamble. Finn dropped his tool case by the door. "What kind of problem?" "The Dominion Marriage Verification Bureau has scheduled an inspection." "What now?" Nishira activated her holographic projector, displaying an official-looking document. "Due to the timing of our marriage, so close to the Dalek Clause deadline, our union has been flagged for verification. Inspectors will arrive in 3 days to assess the legitimacy of our partnership." "Assess how exactly?" Finn asked, a knot forming in his stomach. "Comprehensive evaluation," Nishira said grimly. "Biometric monitoring during interaction. Separate questioning about personal habits and history. Observation of living arrangements. Verification of physical compatibility." "Physical compatibility?" Finn's eyebrows shot up. "They will not require demonstration," Nishira clarified quickly. "But they will monitor physiological responses when we are in proximity. Heart rate, pupil dilation, skin conductivity, markers that indicate genuine attraction." She paused. "These are difficult to falsify." Finn ran a hand through his hair. "So they'll know we're faking it." "Not necessarily," Nishira countered. "But we would need to prepare. To practice." "Practice what?" "Being married. Being comfortable with each other. Physical proximity. Nonverbal cues." She hesitated. "Intimate gestures." Finn felt his pulse quicken at the implications. "You mean like touching?" "Among other things, yes." Nishira's composed exterior showed cracks, a slight flush darkening her silver-blue skin, her posture more rigid than usual. "The alternative is failure. And the consequences." "I remember the consequences," Finn interrupted. The image of Nishira being reclassified as state property made his stomach turn. Whatever his initial motivations for agreeing to this arrangement, he couldn't allow that to happen. "Okay, so we practice." Relief flickered across her features. "Thank you. So how do we do this? Is there some kind of, I don't know, marriage rehearsal protocol?" "Not exactly." For the first time since he'd met her, Nishira appeared uncertain. "We begin with proximity, standing closer than necessary, maintaining it without discomfort." Finn nodded and stepped forward, closing the distance between them to something that might be considered intimate. They were nearly touching, close enough that he could feel the coolness radiating from her skin, see the subtle patterns that shifted beneath the surface. "Like this?" he asked, his voice unintentionally dropping to a near whisper. "Yes." Her answer was equally quiet. Now he maintained this proximity, become accustomed to it. They stood like that, facing each other in the small room, for what felt like an eternity but was probably only minutes. Finn became hyper-aware of details he hadn't noticed before. The slight upward tilt at the corners of her eyes, the delicate ridge that ran along her jawline, the way her chest rose and fell with each measured breath. "Your heart rate has increased," Nishira observed. "Yeah, well, this is weird," Finn admitted. "It is essential that we move beyond weird before the inspection." She raised her hand slowly. We should practice contact. May I? Finn nodded, not trusting his voice. Nishura carefully placed her palm against his chest, just over his heart. Her touch was cool, but not unpleasant. Skin-to-skin contact would provide better biometric readings, she said clinically, though Finn detected a slight tremor in her voice. Before he could overthink it, Finn reached up and placed his hand over hers, then gently guided it to the open collar of his work shirt, where her palm made contact with his bare skin. The sensation sent an unexpected shiver through him. Cold hands, he joked weakly. I told you. Lower core temperature. There was something different in her voice now, a slight breathlessness that belied her clinical approach. Slowly, cautiously, Finn raised his own hand and mirrored her gesture, placing his palm against the exposed skin at the base of her throat. Her pulse fluttered rapidly beneath his fingers. Your heart rate has also increased, he noted. A natural physiological response to unfamiliar contact, she explained, though her eyes told a different story. They remained like that for several moments, hands resting on each other, eyes locked, breathing synchronized without conscious effort. What else? Finn finally asked. What other practice do we need? Nishura hesitated. Proximity while seated or reclined. Casual physical contact, touches that would be natural between bonded individuals. And she paused, affectionate gestures. You mean kissing? Finn said what she seemed reluctant to articulate. Among other expressions, yes. The verification team will expect such behavior to appear natural, instinctive. Finn swallowed hard. Should we practice that too? It would be logical, Nishura agreed, though her usual confidence seemed diminished. Neither moved for a long moment. Then, with a determination that surprised even himself, Finn leaned forward and pressed his lips gently against hers. The contact was brief, tentative, and when he pulled back, Nishura's eyes were wide with something that might have been shock or might have been something else entirely. Was that incorrect? Finn asked, suddenly worried he'd overstepped. No, she said quickly. It was adequate for initial practice, but perhaps not entirely convincing. Oh, Finn wasn't sure if he should feel relieved or offended. Human pairs bond through repeated physical contact, Nishura continued, her scientific tone at odds with the color rising in her cheeks. Familiarity increases through iteration. It took Finn a moment to translate. You mean we should practice more? For verisimilitude, yes. This time when they leaned toward each other, the contact was less tentative. Finn's hands found their way to Nishura's waist while hers settled on his shoulders. The kiss deepened, evolving from clinical practice into something neither had anticipated. When they finally separated, both were breathing more rapidly. That was, Finn began. More convincing, Nishura finished, though her usual composure was noticeably absent. Yeah, Finn agreed. Convincing. Over the next 2 days, their practice sessions became increasingly frequent and less mechanical. What began as rehearsed proximity evolved into genuine comfort with each other's presence. Touches that had once been calculated became natural. Conversations extended beyond practical matters into personal histories, albeit cautiously shared. Finn learned that Nishura had been groomed from childhood to represent House Valquin, trained in everything from quantum mechanics to diplomatic protocol. Her first marriage had been arranged, a union of commercial interests rather than emotion, though she spoke of her late husband with a respect that suggested they had found some measure of companionship. In turn, he shared fragments of his own past, his early promise as an engineering student, the corporate collapse that had left him burdened with education debt, the series of increasingly desperate positions that had eventually stranded him on EOS 9. He didn't mention the failed relationship that had been the final straw, though something in Ashura's eyes suggested she understood there was more to his story. Their sleeping arrangement, too, had evolved. What began as back-to-back positioning for warmth had gradually shifted until Nishura often slept curled against Finn's side, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm wrapped around her. Neither acknowledged this change directly, maintaining the fiction that it was all preparation for the verification. But as the inspection date loomed closer, The undercurrent of genuine attraction between them became harder to ignore. Their kisses lingered longer than necessary for practice. Their hands found excuses to touch. Their eyes met with unspoken questions. On the eve of the inspection, as they lay together in the narrow cot, Nishura broke their unspoken agreement to maintain emotional distance. "Finn," she said softly, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. "If the verification fails—" "It won't," he interrupted, pulling her closer. "We've practiced. We're ready. But if it does," she persisted, "I want you to know that I am grateful for your assistance, for your kindness." Finn looked down at her, struck by the vulnerability in her expression. This was not the composed, formal woman who had appeared at his door days ago. This was someone else, someone who feared loss, who experienced doubt, who sought connection. "Nishura," he began, then faltered, unsure how to express what he was feeling. How could he tell her that what had begun as an arrangement of convenience had become something he valued beyond the practical benefits? How could he admit that he had begun to care for her without sounding like he expected something in return? Instead of speaking, he tilted her face up to his and kissed her, not the practice kiss of their rehearsals, but something deeper, more honest. Her response was immediate, her body melting against his, her arms winding around his neck. When they finally separated, her violet eyes searched his face. "That was not practice," she observed quietly. "No," Finn agreed. "It wasn't." They held each other's gaze, teetering on the edge of something neither had anticipated, both equally afraid to acknowledge what was happening between them. The moment was interrupted by Nishura's wrist device emitting a soft, alert tone. She checked it, her expression growing serious once more. "The verification team has docked at EOS 9, she announced. "They will arrive at 0800 hours. The reality of their situation came crashing back. Tomorrow will require all our focus." Neither slept well, despite their exhaustion. When morning came, they prepared in tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts while acutely aware of the other's presence. Nishura changed into her most formal attire, a flowing garment in deep crimson with intricate gold embroidery that seemed to move of its own accord. She fastened a series of delicate chains around her throat and wrists, each adorned with what appeared to be family emblems. With practiced precision, she applied something to the scales at her temples that made them shimmer more prominently. Finn, having no formal clothes to speak of, settled for his least-worn maintenance uniform, freshly cleaned in the station's public sanitation unit. It wasn't impressive, but it was the best he could offer. "Will I do?" he asked, attempting humor to break the tension. Nishura studied him for a moment, then approached. She straightened his collar, smoothed a wrinkle from his shoulder, and finally touched his face in a gesture that felt too intimate to be merely practical. "You will do perfectly," she said softly. At precisely 0800, their door chimed. Nishura took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and nodded to Finn. He pressed the entry panel, and the door slid open to reveal their visitors. The verification team consisted of 3 individuals, 2 clearly Dominion officials in severe gray uniforms with silver insignia, and 1 human in corporate attire. All 3 wore identical expressionless faces and carried sleek devices that hummed with quiet technological purpose. "Nishura Valquin, House Valquin, 7th lineage," announced the taller Dominion official, a slender being with pale green skin and vertical pupils similar to Nishura's, but lacking her warmth. Finn Rilo, unaffiliated human, now claiming Valquin association through marriage bond. It wasn't a question, but Nishura answered anyway. "Correct. We welcome the Verification Bureau to our residence." The second Dominion official, shorter and stockier with mottled orange skin, raised a scanning device. "Biopatterns confirm identities. Beginning environmental assessment." Without waiting for permission, the 3 entered the small quarters, immediately making the space feel impossibly cramped. Their devices swept the room, recording and analyzing every detail. "Limited accommodations," noted the human inspector, a woman with sharp features and calculating eyes. Unusual for a Valquin representative. Temporary arrangement, Nishura replied smoothly. My husband's contract with EOS 9 concludes in 27 days, after which we will relocate to more suitable quarters. The inspectors exchanged glances. The tall one turned to Finn. You were aware of this relocation plan? Finn felt Nishura tense beside him, though her expression remained neutral. This was already a test, checking if their stories aligned on basic living arrangements. Of course, Finn answered, placing his hand at the small of Nishura's back in what he hoped was a natural gesture. We've been discussing options in the Sela system. Nishura thinks the orbital habitats there would suit both our needs. Relief flickered in Nishura's eyes, so brief that only someone watching closely would notice. They had never discussed the Sela system, but she had mentioned it when explaining House Valken's holdings. It was a reasonable guess, and apparently correct. Interesting, said the human inspector, making a notation on her device. We will now proceed with separate interviews, followed by joint observation. Standard procedure. Finn was directed to remain in the quarters with the human inspector, while Nishura was escorted to a nearby empty room with the two Dominion officials. As they left, Nishura gave Finn a look that could have been reassurance or warning or both. Please sit, the inspector directed, gesturing to Finn's cot. She remained standing, her device poised. This is a simple verification process, Mr. Rilo. Answer truthfully, and you have nothing to concern yourself with. Finn sat, keeping his expression neutral. Of course. When did you first meet Nishura Valquin? 8 days ago. She came to my quarters, and she proposed marriage immediately. She explained her situation and made a proposition, yes. The inspector's eyebrow arched slightly. Most humans would find such a proposition unusual. Did you not question her motives? Of course I did, Finn replied, allowing some of his natural defensiveness to show. I'm not an idiot. But her explanation made sense, and her offer was compelling. Financial gain, then? That was your motivation? Finn bristled. Initially? Sure, that was part of it. Who wouldn't want to escape this place? He gestured around the dingy quarters. But it's become more than that. Has it? The inspector's tone was coolly skeptical. Please elaborate. Finn hesitated, knowing that whatever he said would be analyzed for sincerity. The truth, he realized, was his best option, or at least the part of the truth he was willing to acknowledge. Nishura is extraordinary, he said finally. Brilliant. Capable. She fixed my environmental unit in seconds when station maintenance couldn't manage it in months. She's formal, yeah, but there's more to her than that exterior suggests. She meditates every night but doesn't really sleep well. She hums when she's thinking deeply. She's been trained her whole life to be perfect, but sometimes when she thinks I'm not looking, there's this expression on her face like she's carrying the weight of her entire house on her shoulders. He paused, surprised by his own observations. I respect her, and I want to help her. The inspector studied him, her device quietly recording every word, every micro-expression. What do you know of House Valken's business interests? The questions continued, ranging from intimate details of their relationship to Finn's knowledge of Dominion customs to hypothetical scenarios about their future together. Some questions seemed designed to trap him in inconsistencies, others to provoke emotional responses. Throughout, the device in the inspector's hand hummed softly, analyzing his every reaction. Meanwhile, Nishura faced her own interrogation. The Dominion official's questions were more pointed, more focused on lineage integrity and asset protection. They questioned her judgment in selecting a human partner, particularly one of such low social standing. They probed for weaknesses in her commitment, for hints that this was merely a convenient arrangement to circumvent the Dala Clause. When the separate interviews concluded, both Dominion officials returned with Nishura to Finn's quarters. The human inspector stepped aside to confer with them briefly, their devices exchanging data in rapid, silent communication. We will now observe interaction patterns, announced the taller official. Continue normal activities for 1 standard hour. Attempt to ignore our presence. It was, of course, impossible to ignore 3 inspectors in a room barely large enough for 2 people, but Finn and Ashura did their best. They sat together on the cot, speaking quietly about inconsequential matters, their bodies naturally inclined toward each other in the limited space. Nishura's hand found Finn's, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that had become familiar over the past days. Her thumb traced small circles on his palm, a nervous habit he had noticed during their practice sessions. Without thinking, Finn raised their joined hands and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The subtle widening of her eyes told him this unplanned gesture had surprised her, but her smile, a real smile, not the practiced one she used for official interactions, warmed him from within. "Your environmental unit appears to be functioning optimally now," noted the stocky orange inspector, breaking the illusion of privacy. "Yes," Finn replied, not taking his eyes from Nishura's. "My wife fixed it. You permit a Valquin heir to perform maintenance tasks?" The question carried clear disapproval. Finn felt a flash of irritation. "I don't permit Nishura to do anything. She's capable of making her own decisions about how to use her skills." "My husband appreciates competence," Nishura added smoothly, her hand tightening on his. "As do I. It is why we are well matched." The inspection continued with increasingly intrusive observations and questions. The officials monitored their proximity, their casual touches, their eye contact. Bioreadings were taken continuously, measuring heart rates, skin conductivity, pupil dilation, all the involuntary responses that supposedly indicated genuine attraction. At one point, the human inspector made a deliberately provocative comment about the unlikelihood of the match, suggesting that Finn was merely taking advantage of Nishura's desperate circumstances. Before Nishura could formulate a diplomatic response, Finn's temper flared. "You don't know anything about us," he snapped. "Nishura could have chosen anyone, someone with wealth or position or influence. She chose me because I see her for who she is, not just what her house represents. And yeah, this whole thing started as a practical arrangement, but it's become—" He faltered, suddenly aware of what he was about to admit. "It's become what, Mr. Rilo?" pressed the inspector. Finn looked at Nishura, whose expression had softened into something he couldn't quite read. "It's become important to me," he finished quietly. "She's become important to me." The sincerity in his voice silenced even the inspectors momentarily. Nishura's hand trembled slightly in his, and when he met her eyes, he saw something there that made his heart race. Vulnerability, hope, and something deeper that neither of them had dared name. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only an hour, the inspection team concluded their observations. They conferred briefly among themselves, their devices exchanging one final data burst. "The verification process is complete," announced the tall green official. "Results will be processed, and a determination will be issued within 72 standard hours. During this time, maintain your current living arrangement and communication patterns. Attempts to leave the station will result in automatic invalidation of the verification." With that, they departed as abruptly as they had arrived, leaving Finn and Nishura alone in a silence heavy with unspoken words. "Do you think we passed?" Finn finally asked. Nishura's composure, maintained so rigidly throughout the inspection, seemed to waver. "I don't know. Their methods are thorough. If our responses were inconsistent, or if the bioreadings indicated deception—" "Hey," Finn said softly, taking both her hands in his. "We weren't deceiving them. Not really." She looked up at him, uncertainty clear in her violet eyes. "What do you mean?" Finn took a deep breath. The inspection had forced him to confront feelings he'd been trying to ignore, feelings that had nothing to do with contracts or financial arrangements or warm beds. "I meant what I said. You've become important to me, Nishura. This started as a business deal, but it's not just that anymore. At least, not for me." Nishura's eyes widened, the patterns beneath her skin shifting rapidly in what Finn had come to recognize as a sign of emotional intensity. "Finn, you don't need to—" "I'm not saying this for the verification," he interrupted. "I'm saying it because it's true. These past days, getting to know you, being with you, it's changed things, changed me." For a long moment, Nishura was silent, her expression unreadable. Then, with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with her usual precision, she reached up to touch his face. "I have spent my life fulfilling expectations," she said quietly, "being exactly what was required of a Valquin heir. With Radith, my first husband, there was respect, duty, appropriate behavior. Never." She hesitated, searching for the right word. This uncontrolled response. This feeling that transcends logic. "Is that a good thing?" Finn asked, suddenly uncertain. A smile, genuine, unguarded, transformed her face. "I believe it is, though it terrifies me." "Me too," Finn admitted with a small laugh. "But in a good way." The 72 hours of waiting were both torturous and precious. Freed from a need to practice or perform, yet still uncertain of their future, Finn and Ashura found themselves in a fragile, liminal space, no longer pretending, not yet secure. They talked more openly than before, sharing hopes and fears, discovering common ground despite their vastly different backgrounds. Nishura spoke of her childhood in the Dominion's central worlds, the weight of expectation that had been placed on her shoulders from birth, her quiet rebellions through the study of forbidden historical texts. Finn described his early dreams of designing ships that could explore beyond known space, the series of compromises and setbacks that had narrowed his horizons to maintaining someone else's failing equipment. They laughed together for the first time. Finn's dry humor drawing unexpected giggles from Nishura, her precise observations about station residents revealing a sharp wit beneath her formal exterior. They shared meals, not just sitting in the same space, but truly breaking bread together, finding joy in the simple act of nourishment. And at night, their embraces took on new meaning. No longer practice or obligation, or even just comfort, but expressions of genuine desire, of growing affection. What had begun as necessity blossomed into choice. Yet the shadow of the pending verification result hung over them. What if they failed? What would become of Nishura, of the fragile connection they had formed? Neither spoke of these fears directly, but both felt them, intensifying their moments together with a bittersweet urgency. On the morning of the third day, Nishura's wrist device chimed with an incoming transmission. They had been sharing a simple breakfast, sitting close on the edge of the cot, shoulders touching. At the sound, they both froze. "Is that?" Finn began. "Yes," Nishura confirmed, her voice steady despite the sudden tension in her body. "The verification result." She activated the device, and a holographic document materialized in the air between them. Her eyes scanned it rapidly, her expression giving nothing away. Finn, unable to read the Dominion script, waited in agony. "Nishura," he finally prompted when she remained silent. She looked up, and for a terrible moment, Finn thought they had failed. Then her face transformed with a smile of such radiant joy that it took his breath away. "Verified," she said simply. "Our marriage is recognized as legitimate under all provisions of Dominion law. House Valquin remains intact. I remain free." Relief flooded through Finn, so powerful it made him dizzy. He pulled Nishura into his arms, holding her tightly, as if she might disappear. She returned his embrace with equal fervor, her body trembling slightly against his. "We did it," he murmured into her hair. "You're safe." When they finally separated, Nishura's eyes were bright with unshed tears, the first time Finn had seen her so openly emotional. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything you've done." "So what happens now?" Finn asked, the question hanging between them with new significance. The emergency that had brought them together was over. The legal necessity fulfilled. The contract remained in effect, but its immediate purpose had been accomplished. Nishura hesitated, something vulnerable flickering in her expression. "Now, we have choices." "What kind of choices?" She stood, moving to the tiny viewport that offered its perpetual view of stars. "I must return to Valquin Holdings eventually. There are responsibilities I cannot abandon." "But," she turned back to face him, "the contract allows for your release if you wish it. You would retain the financial benefits. Your debts would remain cleared. You could move on." The offer hung in the air between them. A graceful exit, a return to independence. Everything Finn had agreed to this arrangement for in the first place. But the thought of Nishura leaving, of returning to his solitary existence on this decaying station, felt like a physical pain in his chest. "Is that what you want?" he asked carefully. "For me to stay here while you go back to your life?" Nishura's composure, so recently recovered, wavered again. "What I want," she began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with unfamiliar emotional territory. "What I want may not be the most logical course." Finn stood and crossed her, taking her hands in his. "Forget logic for a minute. Just tell me what you want, Nishura." Her eyes met his, violet depths filled with an honesty that transcended her usual careful control. "I want you with me, Finn. Not because of a contract. Not because of the dollar clause. Because these days with you have shown me something I never expected to find. A connection that feels real. Essential." The simple declaration, so at odds with her usual measured speech, struck Finn to his core. This wasn't the aristocratic heir speaking, or the calculated strategist. This was just Nishura, the woman who hummed when she was thinking, who fixed broken things with elegant precision, who had gradually allowed him to see beyond her carefully constructed exterior. "Then I'll go with you," he said simply. Her eyes widened in surprise. "You would leave EOS 9? Your position here?" Finn laughed, a sound of genuine amusement. "My position fixing equipment that should have been replaced a decade ago, living in a storage compartment they call quarters? Yeah, I think I could be persuaded to leave that behind." His expression softened. "Especially for you. The Dominion is very different from what you're accustomed to," Nishura cautioned. "The social structures, the expectations." "I'll learn," Finn interrupted. "Besides, I've got a good teacher." He squeezed her hands gently. "And a pretty compelling reason to try." Nishura's face brightened with that new, unguarded smile that Finn had come to treasure. She stepped closer, eliminating the space between them, her body fitting against his as naturally as if they had been designed as corresponding parts. "You once asked what would happen if our marriage wasn't real," she said softly. "But perhaps the better question now is, what happens if it is?" Instead of answering with words, Finn lowered his lips to hers in a kiss that held nothing of their initial awkwardness or calculated practice. This was a promise, freely given and joyfully received. When they separated, breathless and smiling, Nishura traced the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "I believe I offered to warm your bed," she said, her formal phrasing belied by the emotion in her eyes. "You did," Finn agreed, his arms tightening around her waist. "Though I'm thinking maybe we need a bigger bed." "That can be arranged," she assured him, her voice taking on a new timbre he hadn't heard before. Playful, intimate, eager. What followed was nothing like their careful practice sessions. There was no performance, no calculation, only discovery and delight. The narrow cot creaked in protest. The environmental unit hummed its steady rhythm, and outside the tiny viewport, stars continued their eternal journey. But within the confines of that small room, something vast and wondrous unfurled between two beings who had found each other across improbable distance. Later, as they lay together in contented exhaustion, Nishura's head pillowed on Finn's chest, he marveled at the strange path that had led them here. 8 days ago, he had been alone, trapped in a life of quiet desperation. Now he held the universe in his arms. "What are you thinking?" Nishura asked, her fingers tracing idle patterns on his skin. "I'm thinking that for a business arrangement, this turned out pretty well," Finn replied with a smile she could hear in his voice. She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him, her hair falling in a silver-blue curtain around them. "I believe humans have a saying about the best deals being those where both parties get more than they bargained for. Is that what happened here? We both got more." Nishura considered this, her expression thoughtful. "I came seeking legal protection and found." She paused, searching for the right words. "Acceptance. Understanding. Things I didn't know I needed until I found them with you." Finn tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, marveling at the way the scales at her temple caught the light. "And I got financial freedom, a way off this station, and a brilliant, beautiful wife who could fix my environmental unit. I'd say that's a pretty good deal." Her laughter, a sound he was still getting used to, still delighting in, filled the small room. Perhaps we should renegotiate the terms, then, if both parties are receiving excessive benefit. I have a counter-proposal, Finn said, his tone becoming more serious. Instead of a contract, how about a promise? I promise to stand by you, to learn about your world, to support you in whatever responsibilities you carry. Not because it benefits me, but because I want to. Because somewhere between marry me and I'll warm your bed, I started falling for you, Nishura Valquin. Her eyes widened at this declaration, the patterns beneath her skin swirling in what he now recognized as deep emotion. That is a significant alteration to our original agreement. Too significant, Finn asked, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. In answer, Nishura lowered her lips to his in a kiss that conveyed everything words could not. When she finally pulled away, her violet eyes shone with certainty. I accept your terms, she whispered against his lips, and offer the same in return. Not a contract, a promise. The morning light filtered through the small viewport, casting gentle illumination over the entwined figures on the narrow cot. Finn woke first, momentarily disoriented by the warm weight against his side, the unfamiliar sensation of another's steady breathing beside him. Then memory returned, and with it a surge of contentment so profound it bordered on disbelief. Nishura slept peacefully, her formal reserve completely absent in slumber. Her hair spilled across his chest, her arm draped possessively over his waist. In sleep, the subtle patterns beneath her skin moved in slow, hypnotic waves like sunlight through water. Finn watched, mesmerized, hardly daring to breathe, lest he disturb this perfect moment. But as if sensing his wakefulness, Nishura's eyes fluttered open, fixing on him with immediate clarity. No confusion, no disorientation, just instant, complete awareness. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice lacking its usual formality. "Morning," Finn replied, tightening his arm around her. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in years," she admitted, stretching slightly against him. "Though your accommodations remain objectively inadequate." Finn chuckled. "Sorry about that. Not all of us have fancy Dominion sleeping platforms. We will remedy that shortly." Nishura propped herself up, studying his face with an expression of thoughtful consideration. "Our transport leaves in 3 days. We should begin preparations." 3 days? Finn blinked in surprise. "That's soon. Is it too soon?" Nishura asked, a hint of uncertainty creeping into her voice. "If you require more time." "No," Finn interrupted, pulling her back against him. "Not too soon. Just real. This is really happening." Nishura settled against his chest, her hand coming to rest over his heart. "Yes, it is really happening. You and I leaving this station, beginning something new." She paused, then added with uncharacteristic playfulness, "And I will continue to warm your bed, as promised. Though perhaps a larger one." Finn laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest beneath her ear. "I'm going to hold you to that." Outside the viewport, stars continued their eternal journey, indifferent to the small dramas of those who traveled among them. But within the confines of that tiny room on a forgotten station called Eos 9, two beings from different worlds had found something rare and precious, a connection that transcended calculation, a warmth that defied the cold of space, and a future neither had dared to imagine just days before. As they lay entwined in each other's arms, the contract that had brought them together faded into insignificance beside the promise they had made. Not a marriage of convenience, but one of choice. Not a temporary arrangement, but a beginning. And it had all started with 7 simple words. "Marry me, I'll warm your bed." Would determine everything. Nishura's future, the fate of House Valquin, and perhaps whatever was developing between them. "We should sleep," Finn suggested, though sleep was the furthest thing from his mind. "Yes," Nishura agreed, settling back against him. "Tomorrow."